Hello, I am Tere Chad, a Chilean artist and curator based in London. My practice is very connected to sustainability. I intend to embrace handcrafted techniques and tactility, the ability of feeling with our hands, as I feel we need to reconnect back with our suffering planet. I believe that handcrafted workshops can bring communities together to push change. I have been invited by Sustainability First to prepare a workshop where I can teach you how to create shadow marionettes with packaging waste. Does any of you know what are shadow marionettes or shadow puppetry? Maybe you can ask your tutor to stop this video and listen to your answers. Did anyone got the right answer? Shadow marionettes or puppets are an ancient art technique used for storytelling and entertainment. Flat cutouts of shapes are used to give life to puppets, which then are used by a puppeteer to perform shadow plays. This one, for example, is a normal puppet used to perform at daytime. This one I made it with recycled textiles during the lockdown. Whereas this one is a traditional puppet, a shadow puppet from Southeast Asia. And as you can see the difference, this one is intended to be performed at a dark place because you will play with the shadows. But don't get scared, because today I will teach you how to do something more simple with recycled materials that will look more like this one that I also made during lockdown. If you're interested in checking out beautiful shadow puppets or more references online, I strongly recommend you to check what is available in either the collection of the Victoria and Albert Museum or Google Arts and Culture. It is an old tradition in Southeast Asia, China, India and Nepal. And it is also known in places like Egypt, Turkey, Syria, Greece, Germany, France and the United States. These examples might seem as very elaborated, but as mentioned before, I will teach you how to do your own shadow marionettes with disposable materials. Since the COVID-19 pandemic began, we have spent more time at home and increased the number of things we order online. We are ordering takeaways, clothing, furniture, tools, and things that we used to buy in a shop. E-commerce has increased the amount of packaging that arrives into our houses. Are you conscious of the amount of packaging you dispose daily? What can we do with the excessive packaging? I invite you to inspect the packaging you dispose daily and to think of ways on how we can change our notion of waste. Waste that tends to be associated with something useless and ugly can be transformed into something beautiful and useful. I invite you to go and check what do you have available in the kitchen bin. So we have some cardboards, and if we open the bin, we can find some magazines. So now that you have already collected some waste, can you distinguish which of these elements are going to help you handcraft your shadow marionettes? Ask your tutor to stop the video to discuss which elements could potentially be used to handcraft shadow marionettes. So actually, from these elements, the only things that would help for your shadow marionettes would be cardboards, packaging cardboards, or also thick magazines. or thick covers of books. Before I teach you how to handcraft shadow marionettes with waste, I thought you might want to see how I have used them in my practice as an artist. When the lockdown began, with no access to a studio, it was the best way I found to keep on working. I'll present an extract from my piece The Spectacle of the Shadows, a short film about the current pandemic.
How dare you!
Oh, excuse me, I didn't see you, Greta Thunberg. But shouldn't you be happy now that pollution has decreased?
The world is totally different from how it was just a week ago. So we just have to adapt and see what happens and change our behavior and plan from there.
It was not so simple to change your behaviour. Did you ever consider the economy or a potential cure to avoid your extinction?
You do have an economy that's going to be operating at a lower level, and that affects all sorts of spending. There's no doubt that'll be the case for years to come.
We are in the beginning of a mass extinction, and all you can talk about is money and fairy tales of eternal economic growth. How dare you!
You know, I'm an expert on vaccines and therapy.
Before we start, make sure you have the following materials: a recycled flat cardboard or plastic, a scissor and a knife, a string. I would recommend a nylon string, but you could also use a normal string of a very thin wire, a needle or pin, a pencil, a rubber, a couple of paper fasteners, a bamboo skewer or any kind of recycled stick, a marker, masking tape, a cutting mat to protect your table, and of course, the most important, a torch. Your tutor might want to stop the video until you collect all the materials on your desk. First, you need to imagine which character you would like to make. It can be, for example, someone you admire, a person, a member of your family, an animal, your pet, a creature, or an imaginary character. I've been working, for example, with politicians and emblematic figures during the current pandemic. You can think of a cartoon or a character from a book or movie. When you imagine your character, you have to think, why would you like to create a marionette from him? How would you like him to perform? It can be a hero or a villain, someone who exists or someone you imagine. Once you have selected your character, you will need to draw his silhouette over your recycled material. I would recommend you use a pencil because it is easier to erase lines that you might not like. If you're working with plastic, you might need to use a marker. You can use images from the internet or magazines as reference. Always when you draw silhouettes, you need to simplify figures. Follow the external line from the figure. You need to deconstruct your character in different parts. If you would like the arms, legs, or any part of the body to move. Try to imagine how you see your own shadow. It is important to try to express the personality through the body language and expression of the body. Ask your tutor to stop the video to draw your character silhouette before we continue. You shall cut out the silhouette with a scissor. Stop the video and take your time to finish. I will present simple different techniques to work on the mechanisms and assemble the different parts. You can add paper fasteners for the movements, and it will be better if you have a puncher to make the holes. Then you need to select the points where you will tie your cords. You can use any type of recycled cord. I personally prefer either metal wire or transparent nylon strings. But try to be inventive with what you can recycle. Use a needle to mark your holes. Try to mark the holes in the extremes, as it will facilitate the different mechanisms. Tie them into a bamboo skewer or recycled stick. Normally, I would recommend to use masking tape instead of a normal knot, because the masking tape will allow you to improve the distance of the cord if you need to make changes. Another technique is that sometimes to improve the control of a piece, you will need to add some weight. So in that case, I would recommend that in the back you add either a recycled tap or, for example, some coins. You can also add sticks from below instead of adding them strings from the top. It would all depend on how you will manage your stage. Ask your tutor to pause the video before we go into the next step. Now that you have finished your marionette, you're ready to perform. Traditional shadow puppetry uses a screen where the puppeteer and puppets hide to perform. To facilitate the stage, you can always use the direct light of the torch behind your marionette and project it into a white wall. In this way, you can immediately start performing with your classmates without needing to construct a screen. You will need to either perform at night or to close the curtains in order to be able to perform with your shadow marionettes. Maybe you can ask your tutor to close the curtains. There are different ways you can play with the lights in order to get different effects. If you place your marionette closer to the torch, it will look bigger. Whereas if you place it farther, it will get smaller. The distance will affect on how sharp you can see the projection. You can play with distance to communicate or to emphasize in different characters while you perform, or make them look like they're speaking very closely or very distant. One of our distinctive qualities as human beings is our capacity to imagine. Since immemorial times, we have been telling stories, from oral folk tales to a written tradition, then books with Gutenberg's printer, to digital printing, computers and internet. No matter the media, it is in our intrinsic nature to tell stories. Stories not necessarily have a sole entertainment purpose, because they can also embrace ideas with the power to push change. Social change is driven by ideas. Sometimes you might feel that you are too young or inexperienced to drive change. But if we want to do something about climate change, we need to come together in order to create a common narrative of the future world we want to construct. To become a climate change activist, you do not need hundreds of followers. You can use storytelling as a tool to impact in your own environment, to encourage your family to recycle, your friends, your neighborhood, and your school. Now that you have your shadow marionette ready and you understand how to play with the light, it's time to perform. First, you will need to pair with 3 to 5 classmates. Once you meet your group, give space for each of your classmates to introduce their characters. Each one should briefly give the name of their characters and describe them. For example, if I was to introduce this character, I could say something like, "This is the London Tube and it's a transport that helps people to move around the city." After introducing your characters, you can develop a short story of 5 to 10 minutes. You should decide a thematic or plot for your story that is consistent with your characters. If I have Queen Elizabeth II, the London Tube, and the coronavirus, I could say something like, Queen Elizabeth II will be driving the London Tube to exterminate coronavirus. One of the most common ways of constructing plots is using Freitag's pyramid. You would start with an exposition or introduction where the audience gets to meet your characters and intentions. Then you shall continue with the rising action, a conflict or problem to be resolved that will make your characters argue. A succession of cause and effect events arrive at the climax. That is the highest point of tension in your story. If we follow the example of Queen Elizabeth II, there could be a point where maybe the tube has a technical problem and it just stops moving. After the climax, you start with the following action, a series of events where you start finding a solution and approaching the end. Following our example, maybe the Prime Minister could arrive with a mechanic to help repair the tube. Finally, you arrive to the denouement, where the conflict is solved, and you can show what will happen to the characters in the future. There are 2 main ways of constructing a story or play to perform. You can either write a script or you can decide to improvise. If you decide to improvise, it is important that you agree the essential parts of Freitag's pyramid to maintain a consistent narrative. You will also need to rehearse technical aspects, as for example, who is going to be in charge of the light, if anyone is doing any special sound effect or would like to sing. You can also use waste for the special sound effects. And at which side are you going to be performing? Because actually you want to avoid the strings getting caught and having to stop to untangle strings while performing. Now it is your turn to meet your groups and start developing your stories. Thank you for your attention, and I hope you have found inspiring the workshop. Bye bye!